All right. I hope I'm alright right now. Um, awesome. Hello. All right. We are live. Um, cool. So I hope all of you can hear me well. Well, at least the person who's watching me right now, which I hope uh, is Rishika. Uh, so maybe we can wait a couple of minutes and then start. Um, yeah, we can wait for like 2 minutes. Make sure that everything is good, and then we'll go right ahead. This is a huge book. Lot to cover, and we'll probably not have time to go through all of it. So, um, roughly speaking, there are certain systems you can kind of consider all of them to be separate from each other. So we can go through some of the most important ones, which will come into play when we are kind of playing centric mage game. Yeah, so I guess ahead. Um, so, um, yeah, let's start the flip thing and start flipping the pages. So there are a couple of things that I do want to go over. Um, need to build. So D&D is not a D&D has a very generic flavor, right? So better, you can run a variety of different games using D&D system. Hello, is it audible now? I've been notified that there is a bit of a lag. Um, it should be fine. Um, okay, so yeah, I was saying that Mage is a very flavored game. Now, what I mean by that is that there's a lot of background that goes into it. D&D as a system, while there are certain story beats, there is things like Forgotten Realms and what happens there, but we don't actually usually think of that all that much, right? When you run a D&D game, you just come up with whatever you read, what the setting is like, you run it. And the system is flexible enough to accommodate a wide variety of different um, settings. Now, that isn't the way that Mage is conceived. Mage as a system has a very more or less fixed setting. The best example of for instance, it was conceived in 1980, 1990s in USA, where there was a tech panic, right? There was this idea of technocracy, where so technocracy was this. So if you watch things like The Matrix, right? Now that is a good example of the kind of idea that we're talking about. So in Mage, there are things called traditions, which are the traditional magic um, spheres, and then there is the technocracy, which is kind of like the techno magic thing, right? So the system is deeply embedded in the story, is what I'm trying to say. So when we see these parts, a lot of this, um, the systems, right? Awaken history, the Council of Nine Mystic Traditions, Democratic Union. So most of this is actually um, the storyline that is associated with this. And if you look at this, even the book devotes a significant part of it. So roughly 128 to all the way, somewhere uh, there, 243. So over 120 pages are devoted just to the story. And the story is kind of in context, and the story is important because a lot of abilities of characters, and specifically things like the Umbra, for example, and spirit magic, etc., is very related to the story. So yeah, that is this area. Now we have, no, sorry, that is this area, belief. Then we have creating the character and telling the story. So a lot of this is more mechanical stuff, um, and we'll get to that. And then we have the most practical level stuff. All right. So now we are talking about dramatic systems. So this is about combat and you know how you actually play it on a table. Okay, so that is it. So let's start. Let's start from, I don't know. Um, okay, a lot of this stuff is kind of important. So let's um, terminology. Uh, with a huge more the amount of philosophy it involves in gameplay and early adjustments happening in the interest. Try to ascend right. Okay. Okay. I was having a bit of trouble, um, but hopefully I'm back now. Okay. If there are more issues, I'll try to do something. So, um, can you tell me where I cut off? What was the last point? Let me roll back 5 minutes. So, who are mages and what do they do? Mages are, um, well, people who can do magic. That's the simplest definition. But there's more to it. They are will workers. So, in mage, reality is um, there's something called consensus. Now, this is a very weird topic, and we will get into it a bit later. But what you just have to know is that there is no fixed reality, and reality is kind of what people think it is, that actually creates a lot of problems, and the book tries to address that in some capacity, but we'll get to that. So mages are striving towards ascension. Now, ascension is something like a religious concept, right? Something like um, you know moksha or nirvana or something of that sort. But that, although that can be what uh, ascension is in this case, it needn't be. Remember, reality is consensus. So it is what everybody think it is. Now that means that if you can get every single person in the world to think that reality is one way, and if that one way that reality presents itself is the utopia, your vision of utopia, then that can be considered ascension, right? Um, Also, uh, where is it from, or where is science from if reality is consensus? The the way that Mage deal with this is it doesn't give any sort of answers. If you have a purely mechanical system, right? You roll a 20, and if it is higher than 15, something happens. Then that system need not provide answers to why things are so. You can just say that, oh, this is the way things are, and you can move on. But in this sort of a system, that's way more difficult. You can't just say that, oh, you know things are mechanical. You can't do that, because a lot of conflict in Mage is extremely related to um, the the way that things happen. So uh, the at least the factions in world have certain ideas about why things work the way that they do. Um, so no, this is Mates the Ascension. There's also another completely sort of different game called Mates the Awakening. Um, that's about a completely different theme, but this is sort of at the crux of um, Ascension, Mates the Ascension. So everybody thinks that reality should be their way, and they fight over it to make um, it into what they think it should be. This is a broad idea. In our, you can think of political factions kind of wanting certain things and fighting. So what makes this different? What makes this different is, but again, conscience, the way that most people think it is, right? This means that if most people think that you can do magic, then you can do magic. It's that extreme. So it is not, um, popularity or certain amount of power that is at stake. It's much bigger than that. Now, these are the factions: traditions, technocracy, nefandi, and marauders. Traditions are, old science, old magical people, whom you will probably encounter in any sort of fantasy book, or if you actually want to delve into the philosophy of it, you can find even that sort of things. So, alchemy, that's an example of uh, something that is a tradition. Even something from Indian perspective, you can even think of things like Ayurveda or homeopathy as traditions. Now, technocracy, this is an old Western concept, but from our perspective, we can just think of it as the ultimate science elitist. It is the bunch of people who thinks that science is the way to understand the world. It is how the world works. It is how it should be interpreted, and it is how it should be controlled. Nefandi are Nefandi are the most typical evil people. So they are, you know, um, they are Fire Nation in Avatar: The Last Airbender, or like Sauron in Lord of the Rings. They're like the, they just want the world to end, and that's what. Marauders are a very interesting case. Um, it is, and this can use that will. You think that it is completely different than from what most people think. So that is they are, to put it a bit crudely, they're psychotic. They they are completely detached from how the world is, and they almost so we had a bit of issue there. Um, Hopefully, we're back. Yeah. Okay. Um, so those are the four factions of Mage. Now, remember, this is a very story-centric game, so this is important. Um, Now, this is the meta plot, the Ascension 1 and all that. But you really don't have to with it. So, in the earlier versions of Mage, or any World of Darkness games for that matter, it this was a theme, right? This was a plot you had to kind of, I mean, they could never force you, but it was assumed that that is what you were doing. That's no longer the case. Now they're providing way more flexibility, which actually people from India gives us a lot of space, right? That feels natural. Okay, so we had a lot of older versions of Mage. Yeah, so this is a nice thing that they've done. I love clarity, and I love it when you know, uh, espe- oh boy. Okay, uh, we had a bit of a hiccup there. Hopefully, it isn't as bad now. Um, okay, can you guys just ping me once if you can actually hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Oh, okay, that's good. Uh, no, if I turn it off, you'll get that epilepsy screen. I don't know what the reason for that is. But yeah, no, why? Okay, that's fine. Um, so let's continue. Um, yeah, the book actually has a fairly good distribution. It explains, you know, mm, how it is split up. So a mage's this is the mage's journey. The mage first awakens, right? So Harry Potter kind of breaks wizards and normal people as wizards and muggles, right? That's what they call it. Mage has the idea of the sleepers and the mages. So it's kind of like most people are asleep. So they're asleep and they contribute to reality almost passively, while a mage is awake. So it's the awakening. Um, okay, since the connection isn't that good and we don't have a lot of time either, let's actually get to some of the interesting things, right? Let's go to spheres, which is uh, one of the most interesting thing about the magical system. So this is a D10 dice pool system. Um, that means that you roll a fixed number of dice and count the number of dice which has rolled above a threshold. S- So let's say that you roll, I don't know, if 5 or 10 dice together, count the number of dice which is above a threshold. Um, the threshold is usually 6, so you have half chance of getting a success on a single die. You roll a bunch of them and count uh, the number of successes that you have. Now, there's a bit more to that, but we'll ignore for now. Um, so, the systems in this game is there is the mechanical component of magic and all that. There is everything that's non-magical, and then there is the sort of the lore component of magic, right? So magic, you have the mechanical and lore component, and then uh, for everything else, there's the mechanical component. So this stuff, personality archetypes, attributes, core abilities, etc. This is the equivalent of the values that you have as skills in D&D. All right. Um, it's actually um, either go through the character creation process, all right, and explain how all of that works, or we can actually uh, go through the spheres as they're called, and spheres describe what you can do with magic. And trust me, it is incredibly cool. Or we can go through some of the lore, I suppose. It's your call. What do you guys prefer? Um, can you guys hear me? Uh, sure. So, okay. So we can go to the mechanics. Let's go there. Um, yeah, let's create a character. Yeah. So, um, the writing on this book is actually really good, and it might be worth it to just go through the writings. So, um, creating a character in this game takes a lot of work, and if you just create a character, you have to know the system, which might be a barrier when you just start off, but for once you get used to it, it's really good. So, yeah, so there are traits. Traits is how the capability of it. All right, so you just have to know this. Two is average. Now, in D&D, you can choose any number between it's plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, and you can have incredibly high values, right? And plus 13, plus 14 at higher levels. For mage, it's always between 0 and 5. Well, maybe 6 um, for a skill. So e- the the amount of gradation that you have is limited in in some sense, but that's a good thing, as you'll see. Um, a mage can be anyone, and mage can truly be anyone. It's up to you. So for the first time, you start off as somebody who has become a mage. All right, it's they've just taken this step into the world of magic. So there is a lot of stuff. A lot of this is confusing, but let's start with name, player. So there's something called willpower that is replenished by your nature, demeanor. There are a lot of things which a lot of which is complicated. The but the way that I think about this is, let's you kind of come up with an idea, alright, for me, and then you shape it around that as you do, like in most systems. But the thing is, in um, in D&D, you can just optimize your character to do most damage on the tool. You don't usually do that, and it's also kind of pointless to do. So this is the character sheet. You have attributes and abilities. Attributes are sort of like the base sort of inherent abilities of people. You can think of it like special scores in Fallout if you played that game. So you have strength, dexterity, stamina, which are physical traits. Then you have social, uh, charisma, manipulation, and appearance, and then what you do when you make a roll is you add the number of dots that you have in an attribute and an ability. So let's say that you're trying to sneak into a compound, right? And you're trying to do it just physically. So there are a lot of ways to go about doing that. Um, so me as a storyteller, I would probably recommend something like wits plus streetwise or set of huge. So you count the number of dice you have in wits, you count the number of dice you have in set of the dots, you roll all those dice and you count how many dice have fallen over a difficulty level. If you roll a 1, that counts as a failure. So you lose a success if you roll a 1. By default, mage rules anyway. So let's, if you are playing a journalist character, let's say, so you are probably decently charismatic. I put, you know, maybe 2 dots there, maybe 3 dots. Remember, 2 is average. So, 3 is pretty good. You can probably manipulate people pretty well. 3, appearance, I don't know. No, you are going to be probably you are going to be perceptive, and you're going to have some wits. So the difference between wits and intelligence is basically street smarts versus book smarts, right? Um, a lot of this stuff is going to be more complicated, so we ignore that. Um, and then spheres, magic. Now, the cool thing is you can have backgrounds. So you can actually look at backgrounds. There's a lot of content in terms of that. So you see here backgrounds. Yeah. So you can have allies. You can have alternate identity. So you just buy it when you create your character, and then you just have it. As I said, this is a very story-centric game in certain ways. So um, yeah, and then of course we have spheres. Um, This is a good explanation of how a character is created, right? You create a concept and an identity. Okay, maybe I don't know if we have kind of moved away from just being flipped through to me describing Mage, um, but this is a thick book and explaining flipping through just doesn't work that way within an hour. So we just go with that. So yeah, let's head back up now. Um, you have uh, other things. So we can actually just go through some of the things here. So again, I think I'll leave this to you guys because I don't know to what extent we can do this in. We've got 10 maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. Um, you know, I will actually jump to spheres because I think that is one thing which is important to me, and we can kind of go through that. So the spheres, as you've seen, character sheet, there are 9 spheres of magic, um, and all of these are so the way that magic works in Mage is that you come up with the spells. There are a few spells which are given already, but you don't really have to stick with that. You have to understand the rough workings of it though. So as you've seen before, there are 5 dots, right? There are 5 levels, sort of 6 if you count the lack of any levels completely. So um, in terms of fears, that's correspondence, entropy, forces, life, matter, mind. So this is how I think of it. There are 3 material related spheres, which are matter, um, life, and force. So those 3 are very matter is matter obviously. Life is like biology, and force is basically physics. There are 2, time and space. That is time sphere and correspondence sphere. So that is 5. Now you have 9. So there are 4 more. One is mind. One is so these are a bit uh, different and a bit weird. So there is mind. There is spirit. So those two are a bit uh, related. They're kind of related. And then there is the weird ones, which is entropy and prime. So we can first go through the matter related ones, or the 3 that we were talking about, which is forces, forces, um, matter, and life. Start with forces. Forces is any energy pattern: fire, air, momentum, gravity, radiation, etc. So this also includes the scientific kind of things, right? Like radio waves and your things like uh, states of matter, plasma, uh, maybe things like uh, weather, or broadly. So all spheres work in similar ways. So one dot is perceiving, second is very low level manipulation, Third is general manipulation. Fourth and fifth, fifth is like the master level, right? It's very advanced level, and fourth is kind of so with forces. The lowest level is things like perceiving electricity and just sensing uh, where things are in general. Now there there is a bit more to it. There's something called paradigm, which defines how a mage understands uh, their reality. But yeah, another big concept. So manipulate is mage may now alter the flow of existing forces. So muting sounds. If you want to be stealthy mage, very useful. Moving around shadows, creating shadows, uh, changing light to make things invisible or even hyper visible. Um, alter electricity, very cool stuff. Now, um, you know, now this is where mage turns incredibly cool, where you can now combine different spheres to get fairly ridiculous effects, right? It's very open ended. So here they've given an example like combining um, forces and matter to convert air to change water into air. Um, now manifest thoughts into energy using mind. Now converting spirit is a bit of a weird sphere, but changing electricity into this weird uh, sort of metaphysical thing. Um, yeah, and then later you can do large scale temperature changes, uh, just nuke cities, whatever you want. So forces life similarly also has a whole bunch of cool things you can do. Um, life is things like healing people or so as I said already, Mage gets very, very philosophical. So especially here, see, uh, whereas the other spheres grapple with abstract theories, life focuses on little boundary facts. So a life mage is usually somebody who does not just theoretically understand stuff. They are somebody who is engaged in um, life-related things, whether that be medicine or lab, biology in lab or whatever. Um, so life can age people, give life, take life away, manipulate patterns of life, right? So grow an extra limb, for example, a low-level life itself allows somebody to perceive life around them, read things like age, sex, overall health, etc., etc. Um, at higher level, you can um, alter life patterns. So you can transmute a living thing into another thing. These are a lot of these things. Giving a crab wings. You can do some weird, maybe gross things. Um, yeah. Now at higher levels of magic or any sphere for that matter can turn really, really nasty, right? So you combining it with mind, you can create lumps of flesh with consciousness, for example. You can combining it with matter. You could potentially even sort of give life to matter, you could potentially change somebody de-age, age them up rapidly, make them a zombie, whatever. And of course, matter. This is the last sort of mediated sphere. Um, Matter, as you can imagine, is things around you. Um, at the lowest level, this lets somebody just observe matter. So you could potentially close your eyes, just understand what matter lies around you, how they behave. Very useful for alchemists potentially. And at higher levels, even with two dots, you can change matter one into another to some level. So there is a bit of a weird thing with Mage where the lore has certain weird requirements on things. For example, here the mage cannot yet fabricate radioactive materials, such as uh, such elements merge their essence into the sphere of forces. Right now, this is kind of understandable, but there are certain boundaries where it is not very clear. So, for example, somebody who understands science easily knows that even if a radioactive material emits radiation, it is just matter, right? Um, so the understanding in this game is mostly intuitive. Now that works as a game, of course. Um, yeah. So similarly, at higher levels, it gets more and uh, complicated. You know, there is a learning meme of mages being able to change vampires into launchers, which was easier in the previous game of mage, but then now change the rules to make those sort of absurdities more difficult. Um, Now, those three are the material spheres. The Now let's not get into the other things. And if we just think about these three spheres, you can do a lot of things, right? In just in terms of what you can potentially do, um, let's we could consider any sort of a scenario that's commonly encountered. It's a D&D scenario, right? Where let's say you have a bunch of enemies waiting for you in a pool or something, and you are a mage with forces, matter, and life. What you could potentially do to just eliminate all the enemies in the water pool in one go is possibly create a new bacteria, a very flesh-eating bacteria, um, or a way worse version of something like the coronavirus, where they're just infected and will get dying losing life. Or you could make alter the nature of the water so that it becomes way more corrosive with matter, or you could even electrify everybody with forces, right? You can also combine them for more interesting effects. And that is what makes Mage truly special. The amount of flexibility in what you can do by combining your not only your spheres, and spheres are the most important thing, mind you. You can also combine it with normal skills that you might potentially have. So as we saw before, things like perception, um, the mundane sort of normal skill. You could be a a dog with high wits or intelligence and high dexterity, and then you use that to channel your magic, your life magic. Um, if you have high per- perception, for example, you might amplify that. with a either life magic or force magic, depending upon the way you see it. And also, uh, we this expands out almost exponentially when we also consider the other spheres. There are nine spheres, right? So the amount of combinations that you have in between them, and with other things such as your paradigm, and then your practices, both mechanically and lore wise, just, just branch out exponentially, and that makes it great. Also, there's a lot of actual Indian themed ideas in Mage. Um, and a good example of that is this particular traditional faction called Akashi to the Hood, where they have it, especially outlined in lore how it is from India and stuff like that. Right? So, um, yeah, they've actually kind of said that, mentioned Buddha. Buddha was a mage who incorporated various mage ideas and made it reality, and this faction which is kind of dependent upon that. No, we haven't delved into factions, and it can, in of itself, very broad. You can also potentially come up with your own factions, any ideas you have. But yeah, that is where we can stop. Um, now, this was we had a lot of issues, both technical and otherwise, and this is an incredibly expansive book. It's impossible to cover even a fraction of this in the um, 45 minutes or so that we had, with all the technical issues. But we'll try to explore it in more detail at some other point. So, thank you for tuning in.